What's up, people? It's Friday night. You know what that means? We drink and we talk about paranormal spooky shit from a skeptical point of view. Mine. Anyway, tonight is going to be fun. I am pumped. I am excited. I am ecstatic about what we're going to talk about tonight and with who. So before I get to that, let me go over the rules. Because we are broadcasting live on my Facebook pages. We are also broadcasting on WLFA-DB Radio Network. So I got those plugs out, and I want to go for the rules. The rules are simple, just in case you are listening on the podcast version of this, or if this is the first time that you've come to this show. So the rules, 3 of them, basic ones. Rule number 1 is that this show is open to paranormal questions, your paranormal questions, and in return, I give you my skeptical opinion. It's not always right, but at least it's a start. And it's a start of a discussion, which leads into number 2. Rule number 2 is that I don't know everything. Nobody does, but I don't know everything. I know a little bit about a lot, but that's as far as I go. So if you have a question, I might not be able to answer it, but we can look it up. And I love doing that. We all learn. It's really cool. The rule number 3 is that this show is about being nice. It's polite conversation between people of different backgrounds, different beliefs. We come together. We can joke and we can have good debates, which is awesome. Just don't be a dick. That's it. Simple rules. And then that unwritten rule number 4 is when I start slurring because I drank too much, you guys are supposed to let me know so that we can end the show. But I already see people popping in. Hey, Bob. Hey, Kat. Hey, Kathy. Juan, my buddy Juan, Mr. Taco. So tonight I have a bio to read, and it's pretty long because this guy's done a lot. So I'm going to say this. Tonight we have a special guest, Erik Kristopher Myers. He is a writer, a filmmaker whose 2013 movie Roulette took home numerous festival trophies and received praise from his critics. His latest feature, Butterfly Kisses, look at the painting, brings his interest in folklore, urban legends, and skeptical inquiry to the screen. Released in October 2018, Butterfly Kisses shot to the top of the Amazon.com charts for new release fantasy and was featured on both CBS and Fox News, while scoring rave reviews from high-profile horror websites, which is awesome. It's also a great film, so I do recommend you check it out. I watched it. It's freaking good. Myers has also won numerous awards for screenwriting and editing for his collaboration with other independent filmmakers. He has been a producer for XM Satellite Radio and a reporter for WTOP, WTOP News. He's written film criticism for the Dagger and Ain't It Cool News, chiefly on the subjects of genre theory and franchise history. Ooh, he's got a lot of skills. Damn. He is a contributor to the Squaring the Strange podcast, which I've been on too. And he sits on the board of directors for the Howard County Autism Society. Plus, he has a rockin' Dad Bod. That's. So let's bring him on and talk to him. And there he is. What's up, buddy?
What's going on? This Dad Bod is...
Dad Bod. I got Dad Bod.
It's sometimes it's not so much whether the bod is rocking as it is a question of whether you're rocking it. But I do want to say thank you for reading that entire thing. That you read, that was like a...
That's a book.
Yeah, that was a lot to read. And I think, and not so much because I'm so cool that there was so much to say, but rather that it just, it's very old entish in that, you find the longest way to say it.
Yes, that's okay. I mean, it's good. And I wasn't kidding. I wasn't trying to kiss your ass with the comments about Butterfly Kisses. I did watch it when I was actually on business training in North Carolina. And I was like, I'm bored. I'm bored out of my freaking mind. What can I do? Oh, shit. I've been wanting to watch this film. So I sat down and watched it. And immediately afterwards is when I painted this thing. So this is a painting I did a while ago, and it's based on the film. And for the longest time, we just haven't been able to hook up, but this is eventually going to you.
When you first sent me a photograph of that, I geeked out so hard. It became my Facebook cover art or whatever. And I mean, I got to say, I view myself as a big giant nobody. Despite all the SAT words in my bio, I consider myself a big giant nobody who is making films and, a part of that independent machine, because I'm just a big geek who never stopped playing with toys. Just now I do it in front of a camera. And so as far as I'm concerned, these are cool things that I'm hoping will connect with people. But at the same time, I'm realizing I'm not part of the Hollywood system. And, the odds are very strong that fewer people will find my work. So it's just so cool when somebody is like, hey, I painted this, or I wrote this song because, I liked your movie and it inspired me to do something of my own. That still blows my mind. So thank you for blowing my mind. I greatly appreciate it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've been a fan for a while because, as I read in your bio, you've been on Squaring the Strange podcast with Ben and Celestia and Pascal. And I enjoy it. I mean, your knowledge of not only film history, but especially when it comes to horror and some of the quote unquote true stories that they're based on is just expansive. It's extensive. And I love listening to all the knowledge that comes out. So,
and I got to say, first of all, hey, Bob, cool to meet you. I think that George Romero and Sam Raimi did, and then people gave them money. And that was what allowed them to stop working outside of the system. And it all comes down to commerce. They were fantastic independent voices who were able to transition into the majors. Sam Raimi much more so than George Romero, but and then we see that with Peter Jackson as well, and right. A number of independent filmmakers. Technically, George Lucas was an independent filmmaker. It's just a question of, does Hollywood find a way to exploit what it is that you're creating on an independent level? And once they do, they give you the money and they give you the toys to play with, and suddenly those independent filmmakers aren't independent filmmakers anymore. Now going back to what you were saying before, I am a huge fan of the episodes of Squaring the Strange you do. No smoke blowing. And as I was telling you offline before we started this, I listen to this show every Friday night, usually as my son is getting ready for bed. And I love, this is what I've got streaming in my hand while he's doing his various steps. So weren't we tied, I think, for the most number of guest appearances on Squaring the Strange, or have you gone over me? Or?
I don't know. I don't know. I think I have one that's in the shoot, but they're saving it. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it's kind of like in case they have a week where they need off or something. So because it's not like time sensitive, so it can actually be aired anytime. So, but I don't know. I wasn't keeping score, but I think we're tied. I think, yeah.
They're good people, Ben, and Celestia and Pasquale and everybody that they have on, and their sort of rotating circle of people. Right. It's a great network of like-minded people, but like-minded people who have maybe expertise in different areas, or really strong insights in different areas. I found a lot of the stuff that Celestia talks about, from an artistic perspective, and how a lot of what she's doing as a caricaturist is, there's a huge degree of psychology involved in that. Trying to bring what is sort of subtext in a human being that you're just meeting for a moment, and bringing that to the fore, in addition to, just the basic facial features and mannerisms. Right. A person's face changes upon, based on mood and upon, different, ways of speaking or communicating, and, different personality aspects are heightened and augmented. So,
yeah, she had made a comment on one of the shows about doing. She was doing a talk, I think, for Dragon Con, and about how her drawing, her caricatures, and critical thinking and observations, and it just like, I had that moment where I was in the car and I was like, "Fuck!" Like that's beautiful. Yes, absolutely. She's wow, I got to talk to her. And I have actually talked to her, reached out to her, and I'm going to try and schedule her on the show so we can talk about that. Get in a little bit more deep into observation and all that, because that's a fascinating topic. Fascinating. So let's jump in here. Let's just jump in. Tonight's theme is pretty much, let's talk about horror films and some of the curses / myths that have gone along with these horror movies about like sets being haunted or cursed and people dying and things burning to the ground and stuff. And I'm pretty much, like I said before the show, I'm pretty much relying on you. So this is your show tonight. You're going to be pretty much I'm just going to be like the producer in the background, but I'm going to throw out a movie and see if you know anything about it. And then we'll go from there. Unless you have stuff that you already have planned.
No, go with it. Go with it.
Okay. So the first one up, and this was a popular one. People started bringing it up right away. Poltergeist, the original, not the remake bullshit, but the original one. And from what I've read, a lot of the rumors say that it was cursed because so many people died, like cast members and stuff. The little girl O'Rourke, Heather O'Rourke.
Heather, yes.
And then a few other people. So what do you know about that?
Well, I mean, it's almost like before you can get into the subject of cursed movies, you almost have to dig a little bit deeper. And what you find these films all have in common, whether we're talking about Poltergeist or we're talking about hi, Celestia. Whether we're talking about Poltergeist or we're talking about The Exorcist or The Omen, The Crow, a number of films that are reputedly, cursed, and their franchises have become cursed as a result. The other thing that they have in common, aside from people dying, is the fact that usually these are very troubled productions. They're usually cases where the studio has perhaps lost control of the director, or the director is losing control of his film. And this is a very, very common thing. And I'm not saying that the two things are related, but it is very curious that I would call, a franchise, and we'll get to it, but I would call a franchise like The Exorcist cursed. Not necessarily because there were any demons at work, but rather because the first film was such a victim of its own success that none of the sequels could possibly live up to it. And it caused all sorts of studio meddling in every single one that led to a very, very hobbled film in each case. And that's before we even start talking about, haunted sets and things like that. You find that there's all sorts of drama going on that you have to wonder if perhaps it's a question of, is this film really cursed, or is there a certain PR spin being put on it in order to sell more tickets, or is it perhaps a PR work of misdirection to get people to pay less attention to the fact that a director was replaced in the middle of, doing the film, or, a key actor died, and that caused all sorts of, frantic rewrites and stuff. You have to wonder exactly where the curse motive is placed. Poltergeist.
When you say that, it almost reminds, it brings to mind The Crow.
Yes.
When you're giving examples, not examples, but when you're describing that, it's like all I could think about was The Crow, and we heard that Brandon Lee was killed during filming, and that the footage allegedly was still in there; it was still being used, and it sounds like I feel bad saying it, but I wanted to see it.
Sure.
And I think that goes right in with what you're saying, is that people wanted to see it. They released that information and people just wanted to see that. So is that kind of what you're describing? Like it would drive up sales?
It does. I mean, there's a reason why The Dark Knight was the most profitable Batman movie of all time. And it had more to do with Heath Ledger dying than it had to do with Heath Ledger playing the Joker, or even the fact that it was another Batman movie. There's a mystique. And the words "Hi, Coral." The words "dead actor," are definitely going to, especially if it's his or her last work.
Right.
This is the thing that killed them, and everyone becomes very, very curious. The Crow is a really good example because they had enough of that film in the can that they were able to get away with a couple of very, very obvious scenes where a stand-in was used. They're very, very obvious if you are paying any sort of attention at all. But those were also scenes that were sort of stopgap glue scenes that were created in order to, artificially pull the story together to, in place of the things that were needed there.
Yeah.
And they find other ways of communicating that information. But what you're talking about right there is a film that is compromised by virtue of the fact that it had to be dramatically reshuffled in a way that perhaps wasn't as creative or as interesting as it might have been otherwise. But you stop paying attention to that stuff because, oh my God, it's Brandon Lee's last film. And
yeah. And in the audience, you're looking and you're like, oh my God, I'm watching this. I'm watching when it happened. You think you're watching when it happened.
Exactly. And I mean, if you're talking about Poltergeist, one of the worst kept secrets in Hollywood history is the fact that Tobe Hooper, the director of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was recruited to direct Poltergeist at the same time that Spielberg was shooting E.T. and on the same backlot. And Spielberg was producing Poltergeist. And the way the story goes, and if you hear it differently from different cast and crew, but some people say that Tobe Hooper directed Poltergeist, and then other people say that Spielberg and the studio became very concerned when they saw what Tobe Hooper was producing, and as such, Spielberg was coming over from another set on a bicycle to essentially ghost direct Poltergeist. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, no Tobe Hooper film before or after Poltergeist feels like Poltergeist in any way imaginable, but it does feel like a Steven Spielberg film. It does feel very much like an 80s era Steven Spielberg film. And so, I mean, that alone is a situation where, if it's true, it means that a film was essentially, I mean, a director was emasculated in front of his cast and crew. I mean, he had his balls cut off as, Steven Spielberg at sort of the height of his powers is standing there directing over his shoulder. That's, and Tobe Hooper never went on to direct anything of that scale again. So, I mean, you sort of piece that together and go, it gets real interesting for the marketing machine to jump on unfortunate deaths and accidents rather than creating a scandal that hurts Tobe Hooper or makes Steven Spielberg look bad. Yeah.
And there were a couple deaths associated with it. This is just a disclaimer. This is probably the movie I researched the most for tonight. So I might have actually information for this. I actually have like a full printout. So I won't be as informed for these other movies that we bring up and talk about. But the big sister, Dominique Dune, she was a 22-year-old that played the big sister Dana in the first film. She was killed by her ex-boyfriend soon after, June 82. Okay, or November 82. So not long after the first film was released. And apparently they had a falling out, and the ex-boyfriend came over to try to make up, and it didn't go well, and he ended up strangling her for like several minutes, put her in a coma, and then she died from that. Horrible. But it's like, to me, when I hear that, it's of course it's a tragic event, but I don't see anything that's supernatural or paranormal or would be cursed. It was a dickhead that just went off. It was an abusive relationship, and it escalated to the unfortunate end. But somehow it gets incorporated into a curse. Because then we have Heather O'Rourke. I mean, I think it was during the third film or right after the third film? It was during the third film.
It was during the third film. And in fact, you can see in certain scenes, she has huge chipmunk cheeks.
Right.
And that was due to the medical treatments that she was receiving.
Wow. And so, yeah, she passed away during the filming. And then the creepy lady, the creepy lady that was in all three films, what's her name?
Zelda Rubinstein.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, she always freaked me the fuck out, honestly. I mean, from the first film, as soon as I saw her, when she opened her mouth the first time, I was like, oh, no. I will not be friends with her. But she passed away, I think, after the films were done.
Yes.
Sometime after. And so all of these were spun into like a curse. Why do you think? I mean, all these unrelated instances, of course, Heather O'Rourke. I mean, that was a sudden thing that came on. But I do read, like, every time I've read like a horror site or, something that was talking about the curse, it was always mysterious circumstances that led to her death. But then when you read the later reports and realize, okay, it looked like maybe swelling of the intestine and it caused this condition or something. Yes, it was sudden, but nothing supernatural sudden. It was sudden. So what do you think about this?
I think that we have The Exorcist to thank and to blame for this sort of thing, because The Exorcist was a film that, I mean, number one, it and the novel were both allegedly based on a true story. And anybody who does even a cursory amount of research will find that the actual case bears very little similarity to the film, and actually bears very little similarity to demonic possession. But the fact that The Exorcist was, quoted as being a true story, and also the fact that the Warner Brothers marketing machine came out and said, people are dying, while we're filming this, family members of actors and crew people are dying, and night watchmen are dying, and a set burned down, and we brought a priest out to, do an actual blessing on the set. That's just that great PR. That's wonderful. The problem is you saw everybody start copying that. And, we then also enter this phase where it starts getting a little meta, because the Amityville Horror comes out, which is also allegedly based on a true case.
Right.
But then you've got people like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who then begin realizing that they can make a profit off of these based on a true stories by creating the story on which the movie and book will be based.
Right.
So they start coming up with these schemes, the Devil in Connecticut and the Smurls and all of that stuff. They start correlation and causation get rather blurred. There we go. So, the Warrens start sort of prefabbing these instant books and instant movies. And at that point, we're also experiencing the height of the slasher craze in the mid 80s. And so, a quaint little movie like Poltergeist needs something when it's time to put out a part 2. They really need something additional to get teenagers to want to go out and see what was otherwise, apart from the scary clown, no one was particularly scared by Poltergeist. But the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are freaking people out. And, the fact that there's going to be another movie, coming out made for TV based on, the true exploits of these demonologists. A movie like Poltergeist really needs to find something to stand up and stand out with. And so when you create this mystique that people affiliated with the production die, this isn't like family members die, like people that are in the movie die. At that point, that creates the allure that makes the audience go, okay, I need to go see this thing that is literally killing people. It's like The Ring, but it's really happening.
Yeah.
And will it kill me? What is it that's so scary? It sells tickets, and you got to find a way to stand out.
Right. And you're right. And the more I think about it, the more we talk about this, thinking about like the Amityville Horror and the Exorcist, compared to Poltergeist, you're right. Besides the clown, that fucking clown, it really wasn't scary. And it really, when you take that clown aspect out, it becomes even more of a Spielberg film.
Yes.
It really has his feel to it. And wow, I mean, I really didn't think about that like that before. So really interesting. But yeah, it wasn't really scary at all.
And it's a very tame movie at a time when slashers were the craze, and the slasher stuff was becoming ultra violent to the point where the MPAA needed to step in, and they started cracking down on it. And the films began becoming more bloodless. But then you've got, the stuff that is a little bit more, demon possession-y, the endless Amityville sequels and stuff like that. Those are also happening at the same time, which just happens to be the height of the satanic panic. At which point, parents are afraid to send their kids to preschool because they're getting flushed down toilets to magical lands and being, sexually assaulted by Chuck Norris. People were seeing witchcraft and Satanism behind every picket fence.
Yeah.
So, I feel like everything became sort of, ultra-fied. It's the 1980s.
Yeah.
Excess was everywhere.
Yeah. Friday the 13th. I mean, those movies were like the big slasher, and blood and guts. And I actually just watched part 2, and it was just like, wow, that's a lot of blood. I remember seeing this. Yeah, it was pretty graphic. Okay.
So cashing in on the death of your cast members, I mean, that's a ticket right there. That's a gold ticket right there, that you don't get that sort of luck. Our people are dying. Let's ride that to #1 at the box office this week.
It sounds so horrible, but you're right. It works. It works. Oh,
there is no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. We got a question from JD. I'm going to cover us up. Do either of you think that the context of the film has something to do with whether or not stories of curses or hauntings emerge during troubled production? For example, I don't think there's any stories of Blade Runner or The Island of Dr. Moreau being cursed, and filming those movies was hell, but they're not films about the supernatural.
You wanna jump on this first, or?
Well, I mean, I think the context of the film does have something to do with it. I mean, as we already been talking about, the time period these films came out. Yes, it was big with slashers or based on true story. I mean, I think that has a big deal. That would be the angle I'm going with. That if you have like the Amityville Horror coming out, or The Exorcist, and you have that tagline based on a true story, that this was a time when people like me, we were growing up watching like Unsolved Mysteries or In Search Of, and these were supernatural mysteries that fascinated the shit out of us. And we're watching them on the big screen, this adaptation, which is, we weren't aware of it at the time, but it was highly embellished and just off the deep end embellished interpretation of events. So yeah, I could totally see how that kind of stuff, the context of it, because it's based on a real haunting, and when normal things happen, shit breaks, people get hurt, which happens, I'm sure, on every single production, you have accidents like that. Shit breaks. People don't show up. Something goes wrong. Years later, an actor dies that was in the movie. It fucking happens. I mean, people die. That's it happens. So, yeah, I would say the context really does push it, because if it has to do with some kind of horror or supernatural thing, yeah, I think it's easier to attach a curse rumor to that kind of genre rather than like something like I don't know, like a Lego movie. I mean, I don't think you're going to hear too many curses about a Lego movie. I mean, it would be great, but no, I don't think you're going to hear anything about that. So, all right, your turn.
I mean, every production is cursed. You were absolutely right. And, you know, every film that I've worked on every day is cursed. You know, there's that old adage that if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So you have to be as prepared as possible, so that you can then focus on all the shit that you're not prepared for. But it's really the grand guignol of it all, isn't it? I mean, isn't that sort of people rubberneck when they see a car accident on the side of the road? Right. They you know, we fancy ourselves, or maybe before 2020, we fancied ourselves civilized creatures. But at the end of the day, we are willing to hold up traffic and not complain about it too much and be late to work or late home to spend time with our kids if maybe we can get a glimpse of someone else's very gory misery. And as such, you know, I think that the Island of Dr. Moreau, or, you know, other quote unquote cursed productions that are outside of the horror genre, it doesn't have that grand guignol quality to it, because it's like, oh, you know, so-and-so died after they were filming it. Oh, that's tragic. No one really cares. But the idea that the horror film has some sort of evil juju that is clinging to it, that is hurting people, that makes it enticing. And and I view very much watching horror as sort of the equivalent of rubbernecking at that car accident, because we have the safety and security of our knowledge that we are voyeurs in this scenario. We are not participants. Therefore, it's exciting to watch guys and girls hacked up, or terrible things happening to people in very violent ways, especially if they're sort of archetypal characters that, you know, in slasher movies where you're like, oh yeah, I know a bitch just like that, and I'm so glad to see her die, or that guy used to bully me at school. I'm glad he got a machete in his face and his wheelchair pushed backward down the stairs. I mean, it's like there is that comfort of the fact that eventually the movie ends and we're still here in our living room with our loved ones doing our thing. So therefore, to be able then to go and see a horror movie that has this terrible sheen of evil, or, you know, a curse clinging to it or something, you know, that's getting one step closer. That's exciting, because this isn't just a horror movie. This is a horror movie that, you know, has something embedded in the very, you know, celluloid itself, in the silver halides, that is, you know, exploding and shooting evil juice out at everybody that is within a certain radius.
I love how you articulate everything.
Well, thank you.
Evil juice.
It's just, I mean, you know, we all want to see those awful things happen. And so I think that, you know, even the horror element is what makes it so attractive and so interesting to us, because it makes the fear and it makes the violence take on an added layer. Right. If you look at something like, we were talking about The Dark Knight earlier, and Heath Ledger dying, and that adding this mystique to the film, I guarantee you that had it been Christian Bale who had died, and this was his last on-screen appearance as Batman, that audiences probably, you know, it would have been a story, and, you know, oh, this is so tragic and awful, and we lost a very talented character actor, and, you know, people that were going to see Batman were going to go see that Batman movie perhaps more quickly than they would have otherwise. Would it have driven up ticket sales substantially and had people who wouldn't normally go to see a Batman movie see it? I mean, that's really where the debate is. The difference, though, with Heath Ledger dying was that, just like Christian Bale, he was perhaps more so an actor that had a lot of clout based on some very strong performances he had given, some very brave performances. I still contend that Brokeback Mountain is one of the most beautiful films ever seen, and I find it so upsetting that too many filmmakers I know personally refuse to watch the movie, even just academically or technically, because it's that gay movie about cowboys, and I don't like gay people who are cowboys. I find it sad and depressing. But the fact is that Heath Ledger was this incredible actor, but he was also playing an iconic character who is a perversion. The very core, the Joker is a perversion of childhood innocence. He's a scary clown. He kills you. He doesn't make you laugh. He makes you scream. He is a weird character. And the fact that Heath Ledger apparently died going full method and experimenting with extreme sleep deprivation and isolation to bring this weird, scary character to the screen, everyone wanted to see that. They wanted to experience that which ultimately killed him because of the drugs that he was taking in order to sustain that lifestyle.
Wow. Damn. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't think. I think it would have been a different story if it was Christian Bale. You know, because of those reasons. And I was definitely more of a Heath Ledger fan than Christian Bale. Especially A Knight's Tale is like one of my favorite movies. I love that, and just I loved him as a Joker and thought it was great. And yeah. Wow. All right, so I do have a question here. If you want to take that before we move on, from John Michael. He says, in your experience in the industry, where do producers, directors, etc. get their stories from? It seems that Hollywood impacts our culture's beliefs in the paranormal, but where does Hollywood get its sources? Real life. Lately, I mean, I can just comment quickly. I don't know if this is correct or not, but it seems like they just get it from any bullshit story that makes the news, that goes viral anymore. For one of the movies that I had on my list, which really didn't have any kind of curse to it, was called The Possession. And it's based on the Dybbuk box. Because a Dybbuk box was something that made the news because, it was a hoax. It was literally a hoax that was sold on eBay, and the next person that got it, apparently, there's still some question about the second person who owned it, but the third person owned it. Jason Haxton wrote a book about it. Lots of assumptions and speculation and embellishments, in my opinion. And then it caught the attention of producers who made a movie based on the story. And I just feel like sometimes that's what it is, especially lately. You see like stories come up like the Slender Man, and the Dybbuk box is one of them. And I think the inspiration lately maybe is coming from viral videos or viral stories, rather than the independent stuff. Like I've been aware more recently of the independent work, and I see more original stories there. Some good, some not so good. But it's still, I see better stories coming from independent than big Hollywood, because it looks like big Hollywood is just taking what's popular at the time, making it a story. So what's your take?
I mean, good question, John Michael. It's a really, really good question, and there's no easy answer for it. Other than to say that Hollywood is a system in which you have everyone essentially looking at everyone else's test paper in class, and everyone's trying to copy what everybody else is doing without much confidence in their own ideas or finding, new and striking ideas. It's crazy when, a film or a filmmaker becomes sort of accidentally part of the zeitgeist. Nobody predicted it, and then everyone wants to copy that until it stops being something that's fresh and original and clever and just starts being, another part of a subgenre.
Right.
Look at the Blair Witch Project, for example. The Blair Witch Project was like an accidental success story. Mm-hmm. This is the same year that The Haunting remake came out, and these two movies could not be any more opposite if they tried. But the Blair Witch Project was a case of sort of making the most of financial and technical limitations and doing so in a way that made sense within the world of the story. And it was wildly successful. Now the Blair Witch Project, rather than being this incredible, striking, avant-garde sort of film that was borrowing from some other films like Cannibal Holocaust and Manya Kanya, but nonetheless was the popcorn version of what we now know as found footage. Now it's simply the first movie in that entire subgenre that has, defied genre. It's gone outside of horror. You got movies like Chronicle or, other found footage movies that are, comedies and, so again, it's a question of copying. When it comes to the paranormal, it's sort of, it's sad because right now what you're seeing in horror more than anything else is just endless remake after endless remake. Yeah. Usually short-sighted remakes of classic films. But then you've got you've got other films that, like, for example, The Conjuring, sort of Avenger-style universe of evil demons that aren't real. You've got like the Conjuring films that are grossly misrepresenting the exploits of Ed and Lorraine Warren to a degree that I get angry when I watch those films. The way that they're presented as these incredibly rational and morally centered, intelligent, educated, altruistic, human beings, rather than the scum that they were. But you see those movies that are claiming to be based on true stories and contain, it's like one of Colonel Tom Parker's hot dogs at the carnival, where you just got two little hot dog ends and a whole bunch of filler in the middle, and you're being sold a foot-long dog. That's basically what those Conjuring movies are. They're total bullshit, but they're telling you that it's true and that this is what happened and this is what, the powers of the devil are, and, this is what demonology is and the only way to protect yourself. And people are believing that stuff based on a true story tagline that is rarely true.
The Conjuring films, especially the first one, really angers me. I can't stand I don't want to watch it because it so grossly misrepresents the historical events that didn't happen or did happen. And I did quite a bit of research on this. I wrote a very long article that really went into all the alleged deaths / suicides that happened or actually didn't happen at the house, that are attributed to the house and attributed to the cause of the hauntings. And it angers me, especially with the main evil person, Bathsheba, during the Conjuring film, that had nothing to do with any of the stories associated with her. And I went up there. I actually drove up there. I met with Nora, who was the previous owner of the house. I also met with a former journalist, retired journalist, and we did some work for hours and hours going through all the documents and papers and found everything there was to find. And absolutely nothing to do with killing babies or Inquisition or any kind of court hearing or anything like that. So all the information that was put out by that film, completely false. And it really bothers me because one of the family members, the parents, who put out a series of books, which are horrible, by the way. I cannot recommend you not reading these pieces of shit any more than the anger that is preventing me from speaking smoothly, because they're just that bad. They're poorly written, and just the historical research is a load of shit. It's like on par with somebody not researching at all. That's how bad it is, and just making shit up as they went. So that particular film really pisses me off because it's just bullshit.
I'm surprised the second one doesn't piss you off more, because it's even more bullshit than the first one is. It's less true to what really happened.
I agree, because that's the Enfield one.
The Enfield Poltergeist, right?
Yes. Which they had nothing to do with. They were booted. They were actually booted. I know that they went there. They tried to get in. They were immediately booted out and not allowed to take part. So I guess the difference between the two films is, like, I know the second one is even more of an embellishment with their involvement. But the first one, to me, it's the embellishment of the historical record that tarnishes the reputation of several people that had nothing to do with that house.
Yeah, and I'm actually really worried about the third Conjuring movie. And
yeah,
I mean, we can have a whole other conversation about. I'm just worried about movies in general right now. The impending death of the cinematic experience is really depressing for a guy who decided that he was going to make his life and career out of the cinematic experience. Yeah. But the third Conjuring movie, I believe the subtitle, the working subtitle is "The Devil Made Me Do It." It's the very famous so-called demon murder case, and if anybody is further interested in what I would consider a very fascinating story, the most fascinating story, in fact, that Ed and Lorraine Warren were ever involved with, I would recommend going and checking out the 2-part Squaring the Strange episodes on Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I run my mouth about this demon murder case because it's fascinating to me. Yeah. It's so fascinating, in fact, that I've gotten to know or had contact with a number of people involved in the real case. And it's the story of a little boy who, and it's very much in the mold of the Exorcist true story, in that you have a boy who is allegedly possessed and then has a series of exorcisms and or deliverances performed on them. That's the story, but a little bit of digging starts to reveal that there might have been other psychological or emotional or behavioral issues at play. But at any rate, the core of the story is there is a boy who is possessed and then he is exorcised. In the case of the demon murder case, Ed and Lorraine Warren, of course, get involved in the story, and they fancied themselves official liaisons to the Catholic Church, and would set the in that very Ed Warren way of speaking that he had, it's like, now this is what you're going to do during the exorcism, make sure you don't do that because that's what the devil wants you to, like telling the priests how to do what they actually went to school to learn how to do. But at any rate, so the Warrens are there, they're assisting with the exorcisms, and the possessed boy's older sister, her boyfriend, kills their landlord. And then, the short version is kills the landlord and then says that the demon hopped out of his girlfriend's, little brother into him and then back into the little boy. And it results in the very first trial in the United States where, not guilty by virtue of demonic possession was ever attempted. And the entire family has fractured and sort of fallen apart as a result of the book that was written, as a result of the movie that was made for TV in '83, starring Andy Griffith as Ed Warren and a young Kevin Bacon as Arnie Johnson, the not guilty by virtue of demonic possession kid. But I mean, again, I've read the book countless times. I've seen the TV movie. I've communicated with family members because for a while before The Conjuring, I was hoping to actually license their life rights and make a movie that was it was going to be 2 threads running simultaneously, where the one thread was the Hollywood Exorcist style version, and the other thread running at the same time in parallel, in tandem, was telling the exact same story, but from the perspective that it was all a con. And It was all bullshit. Of course, Hollywood and Warner Brothers come knocking and you lose the rights to do that. But the point to all of this is that is ostensibly what The Conjuring 3 is going to be about. And it was a total scam And I dread to see the po-faced representation that we are going to get featuring those two sanctimonious on-screen fuckers. By which I mean Ed and Lorraine. So
I feel the same way. And a while back, I did write a article that because my buddy, Mr. Baggins, acquired the rocking chair, the alleged rocking chair, where the devil apparently sat in and rocked during one of these during the events that surrounding this little boy in the room when this was going on. So I wrote an article about it.
The beast sat in that chair.
Yes, the beast. So I wrote about that because there was an incident at his museum, and I was able to obtain information from other sources concerning that. But a source that I did not expect contacted me, and I'm not going to give away exactly who, because it's I don't know if they want to reveal it yet. But they gave me information. They're close to the family. We can talk after the show. But they were there in the room at the time. And all the stuff that was said, and this is somebody that's close to the family. So everything that was said that happened in that room with the chair rocking and all this shit, complete bullshit. And this person has records and documents and stuff that they are willing to share with me. But there's legal concerns. So that's why I'm not getting into great detail.
It sounds like you and I have been talking to some of the same people recently, but we'll have to compare notes, as you said. But, I think that with that being said, and I know that a number of items have come up due to deaths in the family. And so certain, original artifacts, photographs, journals, records, furniture, stuff of the sort has sort of leaked out of family control to a certain degree.
Yes.
And it's very interesting to learn these things, but by that same token, all one need do is pick up a copy of Gerald Brittle's The Devil in Connecticut, which is the book that this story was allegedly based on. And in fact, inspired a lawsuit around about 2007 because the book, which went out of print in the early 80s, was re-released in 2006 without all the family members consenting to it. And there are certain family members, and I think at this point it's safe enough to say that the Glatzel family, this large extended family of several brothers and a sister and a murderous boyfriend and a mom and a dad, and the Glatzel family was sort of really hurt by the book coming out and the movie coming out. And depending on who you talk to and what lines you read between, it sounds as though the Warrens did their usual thing, which was they would go around sniffing for families that they could essentially exploit.
Right.
They got into the Amityville business and they decided to keep replicating that. And so you look at the Amityville story, you look at the story of the Smurls, you look at the Snedekers, you look at all these the Glatzels, you look at all these various families, and the stories are basically all the same. Maybe with the occasional wrinkle, because in this one, he was raped by a succubus, but in this one, he killed a person while he was possessed. They've got a few little deviations happening there, but more or less they're the same story. And it seems as though the Warrens might have sort of, and a lot of this is me just putting things together that have not necessarily all been confirmed, but it would seem that the Warrens perhaps learned that there had been the very first killing in Brookfield, Connecticut, and perhaps approached the family or were introduced to the family, but regardless said, hey, look, here's the thing. We can make lots of money. Remember the Amityville Horror? That was us. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say that, here, let's pick him. He was possessed. And he was possessed, and we were helping you. We were helping you. We've been here the whole time. And then Arnie, challenged the demon during one of our things, and the demons took him up on it at a bad time and made him kill somebody, and now the demon is playing with all of our lives, and we're gonna have an author write a book about it, and then we're gonna sell this to TV. We'll do interviews. We'll make lots and lots of money, and all you got to do is sign on this piece of paper. At which point, then the family doesn't get anything out of it. The Warrens continue to make all this money off of the book and the movie deals, but the families don't really make anything. But what does happen is they're kind of shunned and or ostracized by their communities. People start looking at them differently. Children who have allegedly been possessed or have brothers or sisters who were possessed are being made fun of at school. You never live that down. You know, you were the kid they made a movie of the week about, you know, back when you were in 4th grade. And I mean, it's really sad. And it leads to a lot of people who are pissed off and are suffering from a certain level of PTSD as a result. And, you know, maybe that compromises relationships. Maybe certain people want to continue to tell themselves and tell the world, you know, demonic things did in fact occur. Whereas other people are going, hey, I was a minor when mom and dad decided to, you know, sell our life rights away. Right. No one asked me if this was okay. And now I'm an adult who's got this stigma as a consequence. You know, it creates all of these issues. And in the case of the Glatzel story, in the case of the Glatzel story, when the book was re-released in 2006, certain family members, including the possessed boy, David, stood up and said, to hell with this. No one asked me. This has been an issue for me my entire life. And I'm a grown up, and you're trying to bring this back so that you can then try to sell it to Hollywood. So the family, you know, split even further, and they were having all sorts of legal disputes over it. And how they came to terms, I'm not sure, but the third movie is apparently in the can.
Yeah, I did. I mean, after I was contacted, I started to do a little digging to see if I could find like a resolution to the lawsuits, but I couldn't find anything. Nothing. I kept finding about the lawsuit, but nothing. I mean, and this has been years, so there had to be something. It's probably deep under wraps, but obviously it's still going through because this film is being made, sadly, and like you, I'm so worried about how it's going to represent the story or how it's going to present the bullshit.
Yeah. And, you know, I talked to one of the key family members right before the pandemic happened. And he didn't give me the entire story in terms of, you know, how matters were resolved. But we were planning to meet up and have a conversation because I'm in Maryland. I was like, okay, I'll drive up to Connecticut and meet some of these people in person. That would be really awesome as a sort of fanboy for this bullshit story. And then the pandemic happened. And so I haven't been able to make that happen, but I'm very interested. And, you know, one of the big questions I had was, in the case of this story, I would recommend anybody that's interested. I said, you know, check out the 2-part Squaring the Strange episode about Ed and Lorraine Warren, where we talk about this story. Also, check out Gerald Brittle's The Devil in Connecticut book. Like I said, way out of print, but you can still find copies. And then there was the TV movie, The Demon Murder Case, that I saw when it first premiered on television in 1983. And spent most of my adult life trying to track down until I found finally a bootleg of it in the heartbeat before YouTube became a thing. And now you can just type in that title and it's all over YouTube. And my quest has been rendered obsolete. But nonetheless, one of the things that was interesting about the Demon Murder Case movie is that everybody's name was changed. Every single person's name has changed, including Ed and Lorraine Warren. There are Ed and Lorraine Warren stand-ins, but Andy Griffith is not playing Ed. He's playing a character named Guy Harris. So I always wondered what the specific rationale for that was. It was telling a true story with finger quotes. It was advertising itself as telling a true story. And it was basically The Exorcist for network television circa Bosom Buddies. And I wondered why they changed the names. And so when The Conjuring 3 was announced, I went to IMDb, and the very first thing I looked for, I was less interested in who the cast was and what the names of the characters are, especially with the familial divide. I was like, are certain characters going to be based on the real people because they signed off on it? Are others going to have sort of sound-alike names? Will Bill be Will or something like that? Or will everybody be given a fake name? And from what I can tell, everybody is the person that they are based on. So I'm sure that there's a certain amount of this that factors into that.
Whew. Well, that's awesome, dude. See, that's why I love when you just talk, when you just go, give you a topic and let you talk, because so much information. I love it. I just put the link to the part 1 of the psychic or the Scoring the Strange with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I just put the link in the chat room so people can click on that if you want to after this show. Don't do it now, but you can listen to it. So without me giving a suggestion, what is your favorite, I guess, horror movie curse story? Unless we've already talked about it. Which one like fascinates you the most?
That's really, really hard to say. And I mean, for a lot of reasons, and I've already mentioned it a couple times, The Exorcist is not only one of my favorite films, it's definitely my favorite horror film of all time, despite being, sort of a militant atheist as I am. That film has a power, and if it is dinged in any way, it's by virtue of the fact that, at the end, the old white Catholic guys walk in and, use black magic and booga booga to get rid of the bigger booga booga. And to me, that sort of takes away what I think is the greatest strength of the film, which is the horror of a parent seeing their child afflicted with something terrible that they are powerless to help. And all of the people like doctors who are supposed to make my baby better can't, and are essentially saying, your kid needs to go to a witch doctor. And to me, that's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying. But, I find it interesting that it's, sort of the original cursed movie. And again, this is really something that boils down to genre, because you look at a movie like Cleopatra, that's a movie that sank a studio. I mean, that was a cursed film that had Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor and all of this money put into building pyramids and, Colosseums and stuff. And it bombed. Yeah. And it bombed badly. And that hurt a lot of people at a time when the film industry was struggling to compete with that wicked new thing called television. And it was important to bring people and get butts in seats. Right. So you had to put all that money up on screen. You needed to shoot in CinemaScope in glorious Eastman Kodak. It was a real big deal. And but The Exorcist is the one that, everyone sort of talked in very hushed, and still talk in very hushed, reverential tones about the movie because, number one, it's the scariest movie I've ever seen. My mom saw it, and she told me that she believed she was possessed by demons afterwards. True story. I mean, everyone's got that sort of thing that they tell about that movie. I didn't sleep for a week after I saw it. So, number one, it's got that mystique of its reputation. Number two, The Exorcist happens to be a really good, really scary film on its own merits. But then number three, you've got the whole it's based on a true story thing, which people just seem to miss the based on part.
Yeah.
And skip straight to a true story. Based on can mean all sorts of things. Anything is based on a true story. Yeah. I can put together a story about an alien invasion that's based on a true story because, I took something innocuous that happened to me today and I, spun it full of metaphor and made it something else. So, it's based on a true story. don't squint too closely because you'll see that it's really not based on a true story. The only thing it really has in common is the fact that it took place in a suburb of, Washington, D.C. and had an exorcism. I mean, that's really it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, as long as you have like a name or a place, if a murder took place in a town, that's it. If that happened, then you can take that and say based on a true story, and then you can spin around demons and ghosts, aliens and Bigfoot all mixed into the story, but it's still based on a true story.
Exactly. And then you take that a step further and you go to the fourth and final point, which is what happened in real life to this little boy in 1949 was so evil and involved such powerful entities that they have decided they are going to intrude upon the making of the cinematic representation of this story that really happened by killing people either directly or indirectly associated with the production to somehow halt the production or punish the people that have done it. And here I thought that, if anybody was going to be a fan of horror movies, it was going to be Satan. That the devil is like, sure, go on out there and, spread my message and, glorify me as this incredibly powerful, evil, wicked creature. I mean, I would think that the devil would be really, really happy with The Exorcist, scaring people, even though The Exorcist, a lot of people seem to miss the other part, which is the fact that that's the original Left Behind. That is evangelical propaganda designed not to scare you to death, but rather to scare you into your nearest church, preferably a Catholic one, but scare you into church. And that was the intent of William Peter Blatty when he wrote that book and then when he produced the film and wrote the screenplay. That was his intent. But you take all of that stuff together, people, again, does it make sense that the devil would want to kill people in making the scariest fucking movie of all time? No, it seems more like he would be wanting to kill people that were making biblical epics that glorify God rather than sort of, this commercial for, the devil killing people and, sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl with a crucifix. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but people like those simple ideas. Ooh, this is scary and it's evil and there's that mystique, and The Exorcist is the one that did it first and I think did it best.
That's awesome. I grew up in a Catholic household, so like movies like that, no. They were not allowed. I honestly did not watch The Exorcist from beginning to end straight through until maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Really?
I've seen it dozens and dozens of times, but only in parts. Like I would just be flipping through the channel and it was on, and I would catch it like halfway in between and watch it until, I was called to do something or something came up. So I actually sat down one day. I'm like, I'm bored. I have nothing to do. Let me look through. Oh, The Exorcist. Let me fucking watch this thing. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film because I love horror movies. But I think we touched on it in the beginning. So many horror movies anymore are just rehashes or just remakes of earlier ones, or you can see, like sometimes you can sit there and pick out like, oh, that's from The Exorcist. Oh, that's from Poltergeist. Oh, that's from, okay, I see where it's coming from. And that was pretty much, given the time frame when it was made, that was an original story. Like, okay, great. This is pretty good. I like this. And seeing the Ouija board in it, that was great because so many people attribute the Ouija board's, darker reputation with The Exorcist. The whole 53 seconds or something that it's in.
Right.
That's the catalyst that made it evil. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
It's all right. We're good.
I was just going to say there is the association with the God of Abraham that changes all of that for, Joe Walmart. It's the moment that you take Count Dracula out and we move out of foggy Transylvania to a house in Georgetown where the beautiful people live and are perhaps punished for being so beautiful and so progressive. A single woman who has divorced her husband and is, her sole breadwinner is her. She's a career woman. When you see the beautiful people being punished, and we can relate to them because their world looks like our world, and what they're talking about, what they are very much talking about, is during a time of Vietnam and of Watergate and of the generation gap. Kennedy is dead. Nixon is a crook. Children are dodging the draft and they're not serving flag and country. And boys are growing their hair long, and kids are smoking the cannabis and taking the dreaded lysergic. And protesting and using foul language, and they're down with the establishment. Suddenly, The Exorcist is talking about parents who can't recognize or relate to their children anymore, who become these unrecognizable monsters, even as, we're dealing with the fractured, broken family and the single working mother who's, she's not preparing meals for her daughter like a good mom. She's got the housekeepers to do that. She's not teaching her daughter as she should. She has a governess there for all of that. You see people who suddenly are confronted with inexplicable evil, and the only solution is to return to the old ways, to go back to church, to go back to superstition. Suddenly that resonates with people. The more we move into a secular world, the more you start seeing, fanaticists and Trump supporters and people who are so militant about going back to very conservative ways. And we don't want people with different skin color and different, gender associations or self-identifications, or we don't want any of that. We want what's in the Bible. And the moment you start talking about those things in a serious film, because The Exorcist was not a Hammer film, it was not a drive-in Dracula film, it was a serious film made by a serious filmmaker, starring serious actors from a serious studio. And it just so happens that the one stage that hosts Linda Blair's character's bedroom, the room in which all the demonic activity occurs and the exorcism takes place, that one stage mysteriously catches fire and burns down. And the night watchman who's watching the sets, he drops dead. And Max von Sydow, the titular exorcist, his brother dies, and Jason Miller's kid is in a motorcycle accident. And most creepily, Jack McGowan, who plays a character who dies in the movie. He's the one who's found at the bottom of the M Street steps with his head turned around backwards. He dies immediately upon finishing filming. That's some scary shit. And that doesn't, get into the fact that that was a huge production that was doing special effects and things that had never been done before. Thus, the shooting schedule was not 3 months or something. It was 18 months. They were filming for a year and a half. And during a year and a half, so many people are going to die. So many things are going to happen. And yeah, it's creepy that the guy who played Burke Dennings, who dies in the movie, dies in real life, but he wasn't found with his head turned around backwards. He died. People die. It happens. But you spin that, and you throw in the fact that, the address of the building where you're doing the final edit and sound mix, the number of that building was 666. Again, it's great PR, man. It's great PR. And everyone's tried to copy it since.
Yeah. I just want to say I was on those steps. I walked all the way down them, walked all the way up them, so, which is a long set of steps, so I could see the house. Awesome. And yes, the steps are not right outside that window. There is no way you could jump out that window and fall down those steps. No way. No.
They built a facade.
Yeah.
So when you look at the movie and the classic iconic image of Max von Sydow in silhouette standing there in front of the house, where that light source is coming from, that's casting the beam upon him, is from a part of the house that doesn't exist. So when you see the real townhouse, it's actually quite small. The current owners let me in, and I didn't get to go into the house, but I got to, dork around on the front patio there and come inside the gate. And it's very, very small. It's incredibly small. Even the roof that you see in the film is created. There's a cap which allows Ellen Burstyn's character to go and have a scene in the attic early in the film that you can't have in real life, because it's just this little rectangle. It's a shoebox, basically.
Yeah, it's quite small. I haven't been inside, but I've been outside with the gates open to be able to see the driveway, the brick driveway going.
The next time you go, you better let me know, because I have been known to do tours of all the shooting locations from the first and third films. So
when do you want to do this?
It's 2020, man. The world could end tomorrow, so we better make plans.
I have masks. I can wear a mask. I can come. I have this weekend free. Don't tempt me.
It's going to need to be a weeknight. It's going to need to be during the week, at least for the. You know something? Here, let's talk offline, because we can make this happen. I would like to say on the subject of face masks. I know that our mutual friend Coral Pollock was on here earlier. I don't know if she's still on. I don't have it within reach, but she sent me the very, very kind gift of a Mothman face mask that I was waiting for the right occasion to wear it. And when I finally was able to, it's become like one of my favorite comfort objects during the pandemic. So Coral, thank you. I love it. It's so wonderful.
That's cool. Very cool. All right. So let's see. We talked about the Amityville Horror. We talked about the Exorcist. We talked about the Possession a little bit. The Conjuring.
The Crow.
What
about Twilight Zone the movie?
Oh my God, that's not on my list. Tell me about that.
Twilight Zone the movie, and it creates this weird connection to Dominique Dunne dying on Poltergeist. So Twilight Zone the movie. This was a film that was released in '84, I want to say. And it was an anthology series where there were going to be 4 directors, and each one did a remake of a classic Twilight Zone short. And the project was sort of spearheaded by Steven Spielberg and John Landis. Okay. And John Landis is the guy responsible for one of my all-time favorite horror films, An American Werewolf in London. And so it hurts to tell the following story, because he directed such an influential film that I love and watch every Halloween. Landis, for his segment in the film, he created his own story. And it was the only segment that was not based on an existing Twilight Zone episode from the 50s or 60s. So in his story, Vic Morrow, TV's Vic Morrow, and the hood in my favorite Elvis movie, King Creole. Vic Morrow is this terrible, terrible human being who is racist and xenophobic and sexist, and like he's just an awful person. And he's at a bar getting drunk because he got passed over for a promotion, and he's yelling out all sorts of racial, really awful things. And what happens is, when he stumbles out of the bar to go to his car, he ends up walking through several different time periods. He goes through Nazi-occupied Poland, and he ends up in the deep-fried South as a black man who's being pursued by the KKK. He ends up in Vietnam, and he goes through these different, sort of vignettes that teaches him what it's like when the shoe is on the other foot. and is, because all the best Twilight Zone episodes were morality tales. He is theoretically either going to learn a lesson by the end, or he is going to experience some ironic twist fate that is based upon his own weaknesses and shortcomings as a human being. And what happened was, during the filming of this segment, Landis wanted a sequence where Morrow's character is in Vietnam, and he is in the process of fleeing a helicopter and soldiers who are in pursuit of him. And he has the sudden realization that he is the only person who is able to save these two small Vietnamese children. And so he grabs one under each arm, and he begins sort of wading through knee or thigh deep water as a helicopter is coming down and shining light on him. What happened was there was a helicopter accident, and the copter, basically there were some squibs, there were parts that were supposed to artificially explode, and the helicopter basically lost its balance, fell down into the water, and the blades decapitated Morrow and the one child, whereas the body of the helicopter crushed the second child. Ugh. And this was made all the more tragic based on the fact that Landis had used essentially illegal child labor to get around the very strict California shooting laws that state that a kid can only be on set, which includes education time and also includes makeup time. And anyone who's ever been on a film set in the days of film can tell you there's a reason why movies, might only shoot 2 pages of a 90 or a 120-minute script a day. Film is a laborious process. And so this is why very often there are stand-ins used for children. Little people are used for certain shots. There are all sorts of, there's all sorts of trickery. And in the age of digital now, it's so easy to, shoot somebody against a green screen and composite them into another shot, or use digital face replacement. There's all sorts of tricks. But back in the early 80s, those tricks didn't really exist. And Landis just decided, well, we'll get these 2 kids. It'll be off the books. We're going to pay the mom under the table, and we're going to use these kids for these, I think it was like 2:00 in the morning or something that they filmed. And this terrible, tragic accident happened. And it's made all the more tragic based on the fact that, and I feel terrible even saying this for anybody who might be tempted to do a very, very quick YouTube search, but some piece of garbage associated with Twilight Zone, the movie, allowed for the footage that features Morrow's death to be leaked. And it was shot from several different camera setups so that they could do this big stunt and get all the angles and really only have to do it once or maybe twice. So there is footage shot from all sorts of different angles of the helicopter going over and Morrow and the one child being decapitated, the other child being crushed. And it's just out there on the internet, and it's horrible that you can find it, but you can. Right. And ultimately, this Landis and the producers, they never did any jail time. They had to pay certain fines. Hollywood has now become far more strict about child labor laws as a consequence of Twilight Zone, the movie. Twilight Zone, the movie, is a film that, if we want to call it cursed, it was cursed in the sense that the negative press that went on about what Landis did caused a lot of people to not want to see the film, and for critics to be predisposed to hate it because it had, why didn't Spielberg? He was a producer. Why did he allow this to happen? And Spielberg was Hollywood's golden boy. That's the year of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He was like this about the movie. And he said, I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. Shame on you, John Landis. John Landis's career never really recovered. He had Beverly Hills Cop after that, but aside from the 2 Beverly Hills Cops movies that he did during the 80s, you know, he never really recovered from that. And what you now see in the movie, when we talk about compromised visions based on the death of key players, that film now has an artificial ending, or that segment of the film has an artificial ending that was not what was written, and it was something else that was shot and repurposed.
Right. So you think this would be the exception to the rule of there is no bad press?
I think it might be, you know, I mean, people still, I don't know. I think that, again, Twilight Zone isn't horror in the traditional sense. I don't think that people go into Twilight Zone looking to be scared, despite the fact that there are some genuinely frightening episodes, and some of the premise, some of the episodes are just wonderful and creative, but it's a little bit more of, you know, a program based on the idea of fables than out and out horror. And so I don't know that Twilight Zone was ever going to bring in a teenage audience during the era of Halloween and Friday the 13th and Slumber Party Massacre, when you know, those audiences, you know, they're looking at Twilight Zone. That show was shot in black and white. My parents watched that shit. I don't want to watch that. Jason Voorhees, the new Jason movies in 3D. You know, that's what people wanted to see in that era. So, and then I think that, you know, other people were just so sickened by the fact that, you know, 2 children died, and Landis never really was like, you know, I'm sincerely very sorry. He never had his, like, sort of, you know, being what is the word I'm looking for? He never really humbled himself before the family or the press or the media in general, in a way that I think people would have found satisfying and said, well, he shows remorse. We never really got that. But the interesting connection to Poltergeist is the fact that John Landis was irresponsible on Twilight Zone following American Werewolf in London, which co-stars Griffin Dunne, whose sister Dominique Dunne was in Poltergeist and murdered by her boyfriend. And Poltergeist was probably ghost-directed by one Steven Spielberg.
Oh, now we're mixing curses with conspiracy theories. It's all driving, man.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
All of it. Holy shit. Oh my God. That's pretty cool. I Twilight Zone, I mean, I used to watch the old episodes. I love the old episodes. My favorite Twilight Zone episode, I forget his name. Oh my God. Mick from the Rocky movies.
Burgess Meredith.
Yes.
Yes.
When the whole thing with him reading, just wanting to read a book. And then finally at the end, he gets the peace and quiet, and then he breaks his glasses. I don't know why. I know I can relate because I love to read. I love to sit and read books constantly. If you found a way to pay me just to read books, I'd be happy for the rest of my life. So that episode relates to me, or I don't know why. It's just my favorite episode.
My girlfriend and I were both separated from our respective children during the first 4 months of the pandemic. And, you know, we leaned on one another through that quite a bit because we were the only people that either one knew who understood what the other was experiencing.
Right.
And, you know, I remember very distinctly telling her, you know, this is like Time Enough at Last. This is like the Twilight Zone episode right now, because, you know, we don't have to do like sort of like kid duties right now. There's no homework. There's no picking kids up after work. There's, you know, we don't have any of that. We've got time right now to, you know, I'm out of practice on my skateboard, or I'm out of practice playing the bass guitar or something. I can do that right now. but it's not fun because I don't have my kid, you know? So, and she was, I told her about that exact episode because she had never heard of it and she had never seen it. And it was wonderful because when I got to the end and I told her the plot twist, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it, she just said, yeah, that's really fucked up. And I loved it. It was a wonderful moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's my favorite episode of all time. But I used to love Twilight Zone, and I do remember the movie. Wasn't a big fan of the movie. I don't know why. It just didn't, for me, it didn't have that same magic of the original series.
I contend, though, that George Miller's remake of Nightmare at 25,000 Feet is terrifying. I think that transcends the original episode by a significant amount. It's probably John Lithgow's like most crazy, batshit, insane, manic performance that he ever did.
Yeah, that one and like the two stories that stick out. That one, especially because with the gremlin on the plane. I mean, that's just, it sticks out to you, especially the gremlin. I mean, because when you compare it to the William Shatner episode with the guy that looked more like an Ewok than than anything scary. But
he had a full body perm going on.
Yes. Okay, that's a nice way to say it. It looked like the pubic hair got out of control. It just went all over the place. But then the other story about the child with the godlike power, that was kind of freaky. Those two are the stories that stand out to me the most when I remember the film.
So I have the opposite opinion of the episode you're talking about, which was called "It's a Good Life." I have the opposite opinion because on the one hand, I really like Joe Dante, and I think that I love The Howling. It's not an American Werewolf in London, but I do love The Howling. I love Gremlins, which I just got to show my son for the first time. That was wonderful.
Yes.
But I think that he did some incredible visual stuff in that segment that very much brought a Looney Tunes, series of cartoons that a kid would be watching old repeats of. And that would sort of shape his reality and how he would construct everything. A kid that can do anything with his mind is going to shape his own reality. And in this case, he's watching old Looney Tunes cartoons.
Right.
But where I don't like it is the fact that it's very fun and it's very silly and it's very intentionally over the top. The original episode was none of those things. It has a young Bill Mumy in it, who has gone on to be like in so many different sci-fi movies and TV shows, and he's a writer for comic books. He was on one of my favorite shows, Babylon 5. But this young Bill Mumy kid who can do anything with his mind and just also happens to be a sociopath.
Yeah.
And there's no reasoning with him. There is no reaching his soft core because he does not have one.
Right.
And he has laid waste to presumably the entire world, and all that exists is this undefined, unnamed small town that is essentially a ghost town, and only a few families live in it because every time this kid gets pissed off, he sends you to the cornfield, and he keeps sending people to the cornfield. And so everyone's walking around in this like heightened state of near hysteria all the time. And it's terrifying. That kid is terrifying in that. And I think that the movie it leans into the humor more.
Cool. So I think we can kind of slow down with this segment and go into something I wanted to talk about a little bit because recent event that happened, the passing of a great man that I think we both highly admired, James the Amazing Randi. So I actually wanted to talk. I usually do a segment where it's the book of the week, and I usually pick a book that I've read or at least partially read and gone through, and it's really helped with the work that I do. And I can recommend, because I don't recommend books that I don't read, obviously, because, what's the point? But in light of recent events, because Randy did pass away like 3 days ago, I think. Big influence. I mean, you can say with confidence that he was literally the father of the modern skeptical movement. There's plenty of people that came before him. Harry Houdini was one of my idols. I mean, definitely did a lot with showing people that psychic powers aren't real, even though he really wanted to find one. James Randi was the one that really organized everything, got it into an organization, got people together, and was not, he was firm, he was blunt, he was forward, but when you met him in person, fucking sweetest motherfucker ever that you would meet. I had the pleasure of meeting him for the first time in 2016. And I could not believe how, like, I don't really say this too much of people. I really don't use the word sweet, but this man was sweet. I mean, he was, you couldn't help but want to hug him. And he was all for it. I mean, you asked him if you could give him a hug. He said, absolutely, come on in here. And then he actually flirted with my wife, which was great. He didn't worry about doing it in front of me. I mean, great guy. But I know that you had posted something about his passing, that you didn't have the opportunity to meet him. So I was wondering if you would, what does James Randi mean to you?
I mean,
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It's just it's a little hard to articulate. I mean,
right.
It's very hard to articulate, because he was someone who obviously, is a giant and has this level of importance that, we really can't overstate. But by that same token, he just seemed like a really cool dude. And, I think that the best skeptics are cool dudes and cool dudettes. I mean, people who aren't out to mock other people, who aren't out to make someone who believes in certain belief systems look foolish, or who don't exploit other people, who don't think the same way. He just seemed like an incredibly cool dude who would have been all the happier in life if someone could have brought him something that, could not be debunked and was what it was allegedly supposed to represent. I mean, I grew up without religion. And so I never really had a point where I became an atheist. I sort of just eased into atheism from agnosticism. But what I did have, and I held very close to myself, was I had the Loch Ness Monster. And to a lesser degree, I had Bigfoot, and I had Mothman, and I had Goatman, and the Demon Cat, and the true story of the Exorcist, and all of these things that offered many of the same things that religion offer. And that is the sense that there is more to this world than what we can see and we can classify and we can put in a box. That there is magic in this world. And in the case of believing in the Loch Ness Monster and the belief in God, both require faith. They require a certain dismissal of data that does not fit with our preconceived ending. It requires us to perhaps ignore pesky data and pesky truth that gets in the way of the thing that we believe in, and to perhaps cherry pick certain, cherry picking science. It's creationism. It's finding the stuff that works to support your case and forgetting about the other stuff or just ignoring it. but when I went from being a devout believer to realizing that I did not believe, that made the Loch Ness Monster more interesting to me, because it took on a whole new sociological level that it didn't previously have. It took on a whole new psychological level that it didn't previously have. And that was the time that I began seeking people like James Randi, and also seeking people like some of our mutual acquaintances, like one Ben Radford, and people like Penn and Teller, and Joe Nickel, and I stopped reading the Fortean Times first because now I had to read the new issue of Skeptical Inquirer. It opened my mind to so many facets that I'd never considered, and that this world is actually more magical for the fact that we are able to believe in the Loch Ness Monster and build a case for it, but that it isn't real, and that, sort of knowing how the magic trick is done makes you appreciate the trick in a way that you didn't before. And I guess, this is all just a very long way of saying that, we have very influential people, and it hurts to see them leave this, this mortal realm. But it makes it all the more important that everybody that appreciated what he and what others do, try to continue that work, and try to, most importantly, educate people. Because, we're living in a time right now, in particular in late October of 2020, where we are, at least those of you who are listening right now that are in North America, we are a nation that is divided. And so much of what divides us doesn't just come down to our core belief systems, but it comes down to misinformation, and that we are receiving dangerous misinformation from sources that we should be able to trust, that we have been taught to trust. And it's dangerous when we just accept it without ever questioning it. Being a skeptic does not mean, I'm going to prove that you're wrong. It's about examining the evidence. Extraordinary claims and all of that. With great power comes great responsibility. And again, I think what I'm trying to say is it's our job to be inspired and to carry that on.
That's awesome. I love how you threw the comic book reference in there. That was great. That was awesome. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, everything you said, I totally agree with.
Tell me about when you met him. I want to hear this.
Well, I met him. It was one of those times when it was like, I was really getting into Skeptical Inquirer and the Center for Inquiry, as in, like, I've known about them for quite some time by then. And this is 2016 that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So I had read the magazine. I was subscribing to it. I had known about it for a few years, where I discovered it. My gateway was Ben Radford, because I had written a book, a self-published book, like a literal, like I wrote it, I printed it out with some friends, and we actually sat at a table and stapled it all together.
Cool.
About photography. Very old school, very grassroots kind of thing. And a friend of mine had sent Ben Radford a copy of it, without me knowing. And that's how we started talking. And he gave me some criticism, good criticism on it, but loved the book. It was all about photography and ghost anomalies and shit like that. So that led me to Joe Nickel and like this whole world of skepticism where I had no idea before. And it led me to James Randi, even though I had seen Randi beforehand, but I didn't realize like who I was watching. So it was like little excerpts where, you see the old, I think, honestly, when I thought about it, I think my first experience with James Randi was his appearance on, I think it was Johnny Carson, where they had the guy that dressed like a kung fu master. and did the whole like pages of phone book, that he could make the pages of phone book go. And Randy put styrofoam pellets all around it, or straws, and the guy suddenly couldn't do it. And I remember that, like, holy shit, this old guy with a beard just totally destroyed this kung fu master, because I didn't realize, what a kung fu master actually was. Right. So I think that was my first experience with James Randi. And then once all of this, when I got more involved with Skeptical Inquirer, I realized, like, oh, there's the James Randi Educational Foundation and the $1 Million Challenge. And I got into that. I actually wrote a few articles for the JREF website. So it was really cool. But SciCon was coming up, 2016. It was in Las Vegas. It was I think it was the first major conference they were doing in Vegas. And they announced James Randi was going to be like the main guest, like the big deal guest. And I sat down with my wife. I mean, I don't make a lot of money. We don't make a lot of money. So it was like, I really want to, I want to go out there. I want to go out there because this is a person that, like, this is phenomenal. Like, I have Flim Flam, one of my favorite books of all time. I really, really want to meet him. And I almost feel embarrassed to say it, but it was like he was getting up there, and it was like, I don't know how much longer he's going to be with us. I really, really want to meet this guy. I like, this is bucket list, like, number one. And we saved up the money for almost a year. We saved, and we were able to pay to get out there. And one of the things that I noticed on what I was following him on social media was that he said, if you want a hug, all you have to do is ask. And I remember that. And as soon as I got there, I saw him. I totally geeked out. And then once I calmed down, I walked over to him and I said, hey, I'm a big fan. I love your work. I would really, really like to give you a hug. And he's like, well, bring it on in. And he put his arms up. I mean, and the guy was literally like 4 feet tall.
Right.
So gave me a hug and immediately said, hey, your wife's hot. Wow. This guy's hitting my wife. Okay, great. But we talked, went to a lecture later on. He sat next to us. It was great. I was able to, I'm totally going to show this off, like, autograph my book, which I'm very proud of.
Nice.
And I mean, we had a luncheon where I got to sit next to him again, sit at the table with him and talk to him. And I mean, you see him on TV, you see the videos, because they're constantly used with like psychic stings or debunking psychics and all their paranormal claims. And you see that he's pretty, like, straightforward. He's blunt. He's very serious. But when you met him in person, nicest guy you could ever want to meet. Very sweet, very considerate, very courteous, and just simple to talk to. He talked to you like you were his best friend, even if you just met him. And the last time I met him was 2018, I think, because the 2019 conference was canceled. But 2018, I was out of Vegas again, was able to meet him again. And he was in a wheelchair, walked up to him. I said, hey, Mr. Randi, do you mind if I take a selfie? And he looked me dead in the eye and said, hey, Kenny, of course. And
that's awesome.
That blew me away, because I wasn't wearing a name tag. He remembered my name, and we've only met for a few minutes before. And just saying that almost made me cry, because I was like, this guy is someone that I look up to so much, and he remembered my name. Holy shit. Like, this is amazing.
That's really awesome that you've got an autographed book, but the fact that you've got that story is 10 times more awesome. You know, it's I've reached a point where I've stopped asking people for autographs because I feel that if I can have an encounter with someone and be able to tell a story like that, then that's significantly that's really what the thing is all about. You know, meeting this individual. I think that's awesome that you have that story. I'm so jealous because I had hoped that running in so many of the same circles and with so many, you know, friends in common, that at some point I'd get to meet him. You and your wife, obviously, you know, you took a pilgrimage out there and it was a well-timed one.
Yeah.
You know, I've got certain people that I've been, you know, in my bucket list. You know, I've seen Paul McCartney and I've seen John Williams conduct, and I'm like, you know, these people are living legends who are not long for this planet. So I think that's incredibly, incredibly cool that you got to do that. I'm just kind of at a loss for words because I wish, I'd had the opportunity. But yeah, I mean, that's the story you're going to continue telling for the rest of your life, and that's amazing, especially with somebody that inspires you. And you know, I've had many instances where I've met people from, you know, movies or various things that I liked, or that were hugely influential to me, and you realize really quickly that celebrities are just people. Some of them are really cool, like James Randi sounds like he was. Others are real fucking assholes. And that can be incredibly disenchanting. So you got an extra awesome story because it was very, very sweet.
Boom. But I understand where you're coming from. And because of that, like I always encourage people, like, if you have the opportunity, if the opportunity presents itself, do what you can to make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, like don't think, oh, you know what? I'll have next year, or maybe I'll do this. There might not be next year. Like if I have an opportunity to meet somebody in person, like what you were talking about, having the experience rather than the autograph. Yes. I totally agree with that. I'm on board with that. The autograph is second or third nature. Like that's not important. It's important when I get there and I have the experience of actually meeting the person that I want to meet. I'd rather hang out with somebody. I felt that way with Joe Nickel. You know, I met Joe Nickel. I reached out to him because he had this skeptical museum up at the Center for Inquiry in Buffalo, and I wanted to see it. And I reached out to him, and like surprisingly, he was like, "Come on up, I'll take you around." And he gave me like a whole. I spent a day with Joe Nickel, and to me that was mind blowing because like this is a person that I looked up to, and he's giving me a personal tour of everything that he has on display, which was fascinating. Ben Radford. I've known Ben for, oh my God, like 15 years. I've met him once. One time we've met in person, and that's because he came out to Washington, D.C. to do a presentation for a skeptics group, and I was able to make it down there. And we have like 2 pictures of us together, and that's it. But we're good friends. I consider him a great friend, you know, and we work together a lot. I talk to him at least once a week. At least, and go back and forth. So if there's an opportunity to actually meet somebody like him or any of the people that I admire, I say go for it. You know, don't hesitate.
Yeah, I agree. And Ben and Celestia and I were supposed to meet up last year, and it fell through on my end at the last minute, which sucked. But that's something I would definitely like to correct. And Joe Nickel is another person who is on my sort of, you know, hero worship list in terms of, you know, skeptical investigators. He's somebody that you know, this just the passing of James Randi is making me go, okay, all right. So Joe Nickel and Michael Shermer and Adrian Shine, and there are a couple of people I need to meet, and you know, at least be able to go, hey. Thanks for influencing me. And
yes, I mean, I mean, we can totally drop names here, but like even Celestia Ward, not even, but Celestia Ward, I was so excited to meet her because she came out to SciCon. I know she was having a rough time. She had just had a baby and she was there, and I know I was bugging the shit out of her. I know it, but I was so excited to see her and to meet her for the first time. Even though she was trying to get around to other places to attend lectures, we got to talk for a few minutes. And then the following year, I got to hang out with her a little bit. Pascal, I haven't met him yet, but I want to. He's actually helped me with some of my work. I did an article about Elvis Presley appearing in Home Alone. I went through a whole thing with that, and he actually helped me a lot with that. So, like, he's another person that I would really, really like to meet, not only to just meet because I listen to him whenever he's on the podcast, but the guy helped me. So, like, anyone that helps me, I feel really appreciative of, and I really want to meet him and hang out with him, have a beer or, whatever, and do that. But, yeah, I mean, several people, especially when I go to science conferences, it's so cool to see how real people, I think you mentioned it, like, even though they're celebrities to us, they're just real people, and I've hung out with Bill Nye, which was like mind blowing. Just sat down, having a drink and talking shit with him, science shit, but talking shit with him. And Susan Gerbic, I mean, she's a good friend of mine, Mark Edward. These are all people that have taught me a lot of stuff, and to be able to hang out with them is wonderful. So I definitely encourage anyone, if you have the opportunity, do not hesitate. Make it happen.
Make it happen, because there are a lot of, I've always sort of argued that I think people who go to movie conventions or, sci-fi cons or whatever it is, and they stand in line to pay some celebrity $50, $100, $200 to pose with them for a picture. I've pissed off more than one person by saying that I think that paying for a celebrity's autograph and then bragging about it on Facebook is like going to a hooker and telling all your friends that you just got laid. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This person would have nothing to do with you if you did not hand them money. And when I was doing the tour of film festivals in 2018 for Butterfly Kisses, I went to a lot of horror cons, and I met, since I was, in some cases I was considered talent because my film was playing, I would get to go to certain dinners or certain luncheons or whatever. And there would be various actors or filmmakers, some of whom were from, movies that I really, really liked. And it was very disappointing to kind of walk the floor before I met some of these people, and just kind of like, as they're sitting at their respective booths with and they always have a handler with them, and that handler is the one that makes sure they get their lunch and they get to take their smoke break every 15 minutes. And, the handler is there to show them around and take care of them. And you see in some cases these horror icons who are just like, sometimes pissing their handler or their agent off because they don't give a shit. There's a kid here that knows that I was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Come here, let's take a picture, or just willing to talk to anybody and seeming very genuine about it. Then you got the people who are just sitting there at their booth doing this on the phone and flicking through, and then they see an object move through their line of sight. They look up. You didn't walk up to them, fuck you. They just go back to reading. But the minute you approach with an open wallet, oh, hi, oh my gosh, yes, thank you for coming to, they're actors. That's what they're doing. They're acting. Right. And so I always felt like that experience is something that you can find. You just have to go out there and meet people, whether that is by creating something of your own or by becoming, you interview people or whatever that is, find your way to meet people. Don't pay for a fucking autograph or a Facebook picture from someone who literally would not give you the time of day, or ask security to remove you if you came up and tried to force your conversation on them. It's like talking to a girl at a strip club and you're not buying her a $30 drink, Bouncers move in.
I agree. And that's, I guess that's why I like the science conventions I've been to. I mean, I haven't been to a lot. Admittedly, I've been to skeptic groups, but SciCon is the big conference that I've been to, and everyone has been so nice. Like literally, and this is a story that I love to tell. So I'm at the 2017, I think, SciCon, and Bill Nye shows up unannounced. Okay, I know he was there. I saw him. I actually was part of a big conversation with like 6 or 7 other people, and then the next morning, he shows up in the morning. The poor guy, I felt bad for him, but he had just woken up. He was just trying to get coffee. And here comes me, totally geeking out because I've watched him as a kid. Like, I'm like, oh my God, is it Bill Nye? I'm totally like, walk up and I say, can I get a picture with you? I absolutely love your work. You inspired me. Great. And I know the guy is tired. I know it, but this was like the only opportunity that I had. And without skipping a beat, even though he had a tired look on his face, he's like, okay, come here. Like that to me, with what you're talking about, that to me is more than anything. Like that's worth more than paying like $500 for your, picture with all the Avengers. That because the guy was tired, but he still was like, okay, you know what? You're a fan. You appreciate my work. I'm going to help you.
And that probably raised your opinion of him in the long run because you had that human moment with him. And so, yeah, that's a very, very, very cool thing.
Oh, man. All right. I have kept you for 2 hours. So I'm going to give you the opportunity. Please promote whatever you have coming up. You have anything coming up, please feel free to promote the crap out of what you got.
Well, for anybody who's watching this live or may watch this later, today, October 23rd, in the year of our Lord 2020, this week is actually the 7th anniversary of my first feature film being released. It's called Roulette. I don't know if you could see the cover without the glare. Oh. But Roulette is available streaming on Amazon Prime. So wish it a happy birthday or support the dying physical media format. And today is also, ironically, the 2-year anniversary of the release of my film Butterfly Kisses. This is also available in physical media, or you can stream it on Amazon Prime. Kenny did this incredible painting. I know we talked about it at the top, but this was just one of the coolest things that anybody did or created as an offshoot of something that I did. And I find that endlessly humbling, and thank you. You didn't know me except for a couple appearances I did on a podcast that we've both been on, and you made this and reached out to me, and it was just I thank you.
I don't know if you can see it. Like, I'm holding it up and I'm looking at the background. You might be able to see it, but you can see the slight oh wait, there it's a little bit better.
Yes, I see the indentation there.
Right here of the tunnel with the shadow guy. Oh, I love that.
That is awesome. Yes. That is awesome.
That's coming to you. We have to get together so I can give this to you.
You've got to, sir. And then I owe you beers.
No,
and we've got to do this.
Don't owe me anything. We will figure out a place, and just to be safe.
So you're saying you don't want to have beers?
Well, no, I do. I totally do, because that'll geek me out.
Well, I should hope so. So,
Okay.
also, as I peddle my wares, the October 23rd, this isn't just the 2-year anniversary of my movie Butterfly Kiss is coming out, which, by the way, if you like skeptical inquiry, this movie is about skeptical inquiry. Check it out. October 23rd is also the 2-year anniversary of this book. It's called The Altered Wake. I did not write this. Megan Morgan wrote this.
Ooh.
Came out the same day that my movie came out. And she's my girlfriend, and she's amazing. So please check out The Altered Wake. She also contributed a story to this book. It's called In the Blink of an Eye. This is one of the most flattering things that's ever happened as a result of something I made. This is an anthology of short stories, all based around the mythology of butterfly kisses. And so it's really cool to see all these very talented authors, of whom Megan is one, who just came up with their own story and played in my sandbox. And it's insanely awesome. So please support dying physical media, as I said, at a time when a lot of things are dying and it's sad and scary. If you're interested in reading any of my writing about film-related matters, go to Ain't It Cool News, where I write as Erik Kristopher Myers, or EKM, typically on the topics of franchise history and genre theory. You can find me on all of the various social media platforms. Make sure, please, if you check out one of my films, or you read one of Megan's books, or if you are listening or watching to an awesome show like this, or a podcast like Squaring the Strange, or anything that is helping you cope with the terrible, terrible trauma that is 2020, that you are liking, you are sharing, you are subscribing, you're leaving reviews, you're giving 5-star ratings. Make sure you do that for this show and so many other shows and things, because that is what changes and influences the algorithms. That's what pushes unique, independent voices out into new venues and audiences that perhaps wouldn't have heard of them before. So make sure you're telling everybody about Kenny Biddle's show and that you're sharing it on your Facebook.
Awesome. I mean, honestly, this show was born of the pandemic. I mean, I got, people were bored. My wife and I actually started doing live shows where we just went on. We had no idea what to talk about. We just went on, started talking, and like the idea blossomed where I was like, oh, I can do this and just do a live show and let people ask me questions. Let's, put me on the spot and see how fucked up I can make this show. And it turned out pretty good. I mean, now it's weekly. And then, yeah, I mean, support this medium, support these things that come up. I love seeing how a film, an independent film, especially an independent film that comes along that inspires shit like this. I mean, I love the movie. I thought it was great. I really did. I'm not kissing your ass. I have nothing to gain by kissing your ass. I liked the movie, and it inspired me. Hey, I'm going to do something about it. I don't paint. Like, I've never been trained to paint, and it just, some of this stuff just comes up. So I'm amazed that it actually turned out like half decent. So do it. Watch these films, support the local medium, or support the mediums that come out, because it's too much is going to digital. Support the people that make this stuff, and make more. Make more, Erik.
I will make more. You make more, and everybody that's watching, go make something. Come on.
Make something.
Make something. Stop watching fucking Tiger King. Go make something.
Oh my God.
Do something productive with yourself.
Yes.
Go do something. Vote.
Read a fucking book.
Read a fucking book. Read a fucking book. And then when you're done reading a fucking book, go vote. Please vote. Voting is important. I voted. My movie voted. Vote. It's never been more important. As I told my 8-year-old, you are living in Star Wars right now. So it's a real important time in history. All right. Very nice. Here, I'll show you. I'll show you mine.
Comparing the
Can you see that?
Oh, look at that. I like it.
That is our friend Blinkman.
Nice.
Giving the wave.
Blinkman. Awesome.
Very cool.
All right. So I'm going to put you in the background for a couple minutes, and then wrap up my show.
Nobody puts baby in the corner or in the background.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Put me, please now put me in the background.
I have no reply to that.
Yeah, please put me in the background. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to put you in the background here and then close out my show. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Friday night with us. I appreciate it. I know Erik appreciates it. It was awesome. The discussion was really cool. Loved it. I learned a little bit because I didn't know half the shit about these movies that he did. So really awesome. Coming up, any events coming up? I don't have much. Saturday night, tomorrow night, Three Tortured Souls, another podcast that I do with Dave Schumacher and Tim Vickers. We're going to be talking about how to differentiate between good sources and bad sources of information. Things that we do, things that we look for to validate whether it's good information or bad information, like rumors or hype or embellishments versus facts and figures and stats. So should be a good show. Really cool. Other than that, I think on November 11th, I will be a guest on a podcast called Paranormal Brew, from 7 p.m. Eastern to 8-ish. And it's a paranormal show. We're going to be talking about a few things, mostly skeptical stuff. We'll see how that goes. And that's it. If you have a paranormal/science/skeptical event that's coming up in the future that is COVID compliant, let me know. I'd like to be a part of it if it's online, if you're doing panel discussions or whatever. I love doing that kind of stuff. I love talking, obviously, because I do a live podcast every Friday night. So I love to talk. Let me know. I'd love to be a part of it. If you're looking for more information about spooky topics with a skeptical slant to it, my column called A Closer Look for the Skeptical Inquirer online is available. I have 40-some articles up there already. Take a look, see what's coming up. If you're into T-shirts like I am, please visit my Teespring store, which I didn't put the commercial up, but it's Scientific Skepticism. Look for that. Plenty of designs, lots of designs. Take a look. The money from that goes back into my research. So it's not really like pocket money. It actually goes back into buying equipment that ghost hunters use or other people use so I can take it apart, figure out what's going on. It helps me attend events to collect data. It helps me keep the lights on here to keep this podcast going. So any little bit helps. I appreciate it. And that's it. So with that, I'm going to cue up my video and I'm going to give my tagline and we're going to be out of here. So never stop learning. And I'll see you next week.